This generation is more liberal, more tolerant, more Democrat-leaning than the one before. It's not just because they're young.
For another point of view, it's Hard News with Russell Brown and Wammo on Kiwi.
Yes, it is Russell Brown from publicaddress.net, the Hard News blog. He's also at Media 7. That's the telly show on TVNZ 7, now on Freeview and Sky. Morning, Russell.
Good morning.
Maori seats, of course, is one of the hot topics this week. No surprises. Well, kind of no surprises. Do you think that John Key didn't go with the Maori seats?
Yeah, I wasn't surprised at all. The only thing I was surprised at was people thinking that Rodney Hyde would put his baubles on the line when he didn't think he was on a sure bet, frankly.
Yeah. Do you think he got the word already?
Oh, I think he had, yeah. I think he had a pretty good idea. It looks to me like it was actually never a starter because John Key had never really offered any encouragement when they... we have to remember that this was recommended by the Royal Commission, the Maori seat, and it was taken out by the government. So the idea that something would come back in was a fond idea, I fear.
Yes. So, do you think that all opportunities for this are ruled out now? There
are two ways it could happen. One is that the new council could, of its own accord, once it's actually constituted, change the way it's elected and introduce the Maori seats, which I guess is possible. And the other thing would be a referendum forced by ratepayers, and I can't see that working. No.
I've heard the point made, though, that if central government went with Maori seats for Auckland City, then that would open it up for the rest of the country as well. I think that's an excuse, and there are other local authorities which have done this without the same thing happening. Right.
I guess the point is that they've done it of their own accord, but I don't really think that's the case. And I think certainly for Auckland, when you're already reconstituting this thing, and you're going to finesse the way seats are allocated in various ways anyway, because there will be a mix of ways in which the council is made up. So you've got that, and then you've also got Ngāti Whātua's particular role in the creation of Auckland. I think there was a case for it.
Interesting talking to Labour leader Phil Goff yesterday, where obviously he's behind having, he wants to see Maori seats for Auckland, but his reason is because he wants to see Maori voters involved with the democratic process rather than representation, so to speak.
That's quite an odd rationale, really, isn't it?
He wants to make sure that people who don't represent themselves very much when it comes to election day do have a say.
Yeah. I suppose it's a nice idea. It's not really the one I'd pick, I have to say.
Yeah.
But I mean, it must be a relief for Phil Goff to be on the right side of one of these arguments for once.
Yeah.
Because certainly Trevor Mallard hasn't done him any favours in the eyes of Maori voters in the last couple of weeks. So, yeah.
For you personally, Russell, why would you want to see Maori seats for Auckland?
Because of the historical role that Ngāti Whātua in particular have played. I think there is a role to be recognised there, and given that we are going to allocate the seats in various ways, having a couple of them available to voters on the Maori roll, I don't think is a particularly big deal. And it is a big area, and if it's entirely likely on past form that this area of 1 million people could elect a council with no Maori representation on it. And I think Maori interests, even given the current land ownership, I think they need to be recognised.
When it came to me, and I'm not sure whether I came to this conclusion by the right or the wrong way, but I was wandering around the top of Mount Albert, and everywhere around you, around the top of these volcanic cones around Auckland, you see Maori history, and you see how far back the history for Maori goes in Auckland, and how short the European time is in Auckland. And for me, I just suddenly hit me. Well, obviously, Maori need a certain representation because man, they have ownership here.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you're right. The historical role goes back so far and is so strong. I mean, Auckland did change hands a few times. Want to be honest about that. It was fought over because it was so attractive.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, like I said, Ngāti Whātua in particular, really, their role warrants recognition.
Mm. Okay, well, on to Media 7 this week. One of your topics of discussion is PPNZ and the possible fee increases that might be happening for gyms and cafes and bars and clubs and cafes later on this year. It's an issue that we've discussed on the show. We had Kristen Bauman on last week, and you're having her on the show this week, but up against a panel of people. Yeah,
a couple of other people. Damien Vaughan of Independent Music New Zealand, who I haven't met before, but seems like a pretty clever chap, actually, and he has a pretty good understanding of the way that that these kind of performance rights fees are unfolding in new media, which I think is quite an interesting thing.
Yeah.
He did some work for PRS for music in Britain. So I think he might be able to bring quite a lot to the table. And also Luke Dallow, who's the owner of Sale Street Bar. And he's quite exercised about this. I think that those hospitality people have looked across the Tasman to Australia, where the Australian equivalent of PPNZ has really jacked up fees quite substantially, to the point where some nightclubs are shutting their doors. There's no doubt that there's a moral and a legal right to for the copyright owners to collect these fees for the use of music.
Yes.
It's just a matter of how they're going to do it and at what level they're going to do it.
Do you think also the key issue that's being missed is where those funds are actually going? And no one debates that they need to collect these funds, but where they're actually going, because you've got a bunch of independent artists who may be being played in a cafe, but their fees are going to Britney Spears.
Yes, yeah, and there were moves several years ago with the creation of the RAP Fund to try and divert a bit more of that money to local artists, and that has worked. Whether it's quite enough, but you have to remember the PPNZ does actually represent overseas-owned companies.
And also, Kristen was saying now more locally owned independent. They're working with Independent Music New Zealand as well to try and level the playing field. Yes, yeah, exactly.
I think there's goodwill there. I think the people managing the major record labels here do have certain obligations. They are overseas-owned companies, but they're also, almost universally, genuinely New Zealand music fans as well.
Yeah,
I think we're quite fortunate that that's the case. So it could be quite an interesting discussion.
Yeah,
I think.
Just sort of stepping outside that a little bit. Do you foresee into the future a technology that will enable gyms, cafes, bars, whatever, to actually account for what they play and who they play?
It's certainly not out of the question, because APRA does this very well already with radio play.
Yeah.
So it is possible. Whether you could do it at every venue, I don't know. I think what you will start to see, if the rates are too high, is people going around the system. And I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with that. So, say, Fitness NZ commissions a whole bunch of recordings for people to jiggle up and down to, and they are commissioned, and the copyright passes to Fitness New Zealand. So they're sold on by whoever creates them. Okay. You can see bedroom techno producers might see that as a good deal. And I think that's fine, frankly. One thing that often does seem to come up when these disputes happen is the people on the other side tend to feel that APRA are more constructive and easier to deal with than PPNZ. And I was interested to hear Richard Benny, the guy from Fitness NZ, that represent all the gym owners, saying precisely that. They'd found APRA quite constructive and PPNZ quite hostile. So I'll be asking Kristen about that.
Yes, no doubt she'll be wanting to rectify that.
Indeed.
Thanks very much, Russell.
Okay.
Cheers. Russell Brown from publicaddress.net, the hard news blog there. And also check out that debate on Media 7, the tele show on TVNZ 7. Here is Tiki. Remix, always on my mind. Radio Wammo Breakfast, Kiwi.